How about Restoration 101? Where to start with a restoration? I see a lot of new channels coming up, and I see a lot of no-nos or old-timers with a lot of bad habits, okay? So I wanted to go with the first place that you go with a restoration is cleaning out underneath that hood. All that debris. You don't want it down inside your engine because you don't know what's in that engine to begin with when you start it up. You see, a restoration, when it starts out, is kind of like a new girlfriend, how they start out. They're all full of friggin' surprises. Believe me, not just opening the hood, it's when you get to the rest of the car. Just recently, a young man was here and he has pictures on his phone, which are not the best place. I think I brought my shop camera out. Here's one of your first tips, okay? Your phone gets loaded with data. The data crashes, the data can get stolen. This operates off an SD card. And I recommend this camera to anybody. You can buy them used sometimes on. I got most of these used off of eBay. Um, and they're pretty durable. The first one I had, that must have lasted me about 3 years. And I have this one about that long. And I bought, I think that one's still good. Actually, the first one that I bought, the yellow one like this, it was the problem is I didn't have the rechargeable batteries. So that's another thing is you're going to go to into an expense restoring any vehicle. Okay, I don't care if you find it in that barn. Okay, this is the first crisis I'm going to give you guys. Is everybody wants to see if that engine is free. Well, it might have been in a barn 20 years, but it might have sat another 5, 10, or 20, maybe with the goddamn hood open after it wouldn't run. You see a lot of vehicles, especially if you see a snowplow on a truck, that's like a skull and crossbones to the transmission. I see a lot of these vehicles, they're picking old vehicles up out of the field or some barnyard, and somehow it magically drives out and the transmissions are all right. Well, maybe down south that happens, but up here we're in a mountainous area, and almost anything that you see that's parked, normally it was the transmission, and there are not that many transmission builders around here. Transmissions really in this country for especially these older vintage vehicles, it's a crisis. And if you go shopping in that online aura, that is a problem. But let's get back to you opened the power barn, as Derek would say. I hate using somebody else's quotes. I think I'm seeing other guys do it, and it's kind of cheesy. But I do admire Derek. He was a pioneer like me. I started out with those motorized bikes, showing people how to make things and do things for themselves. So I don't feel that I'm stealing anything from him. And I'm not trying to be cute and witty with him. I'm actually trying to give people some coaching here, like Coach Buck. Okay, I got my antlers down, and I'm going to show you exactly the way my mind thinks is, yes, I clear the debris. The next thing is that engine free? Okay, here's the hink and kink. It's in the garage 20 years, and you just start wrenching on that crank bolt trying to turn it over. Number one thing you do is cut them goddamn belts off of everything. Okay? The belts can be rusted to the pulleys, and they can be tougher than a seized up motor, rusted up motor itself. They really can. So that's the first thing you do, okay? Because the concessions, what you look at, okay, are these things. Here, I have my list, okay? These are the things that you buy brand new. Anticipate that you're going to need plugs and wires right away, okay? But your engine's sitting in there, okay? So what else do I buy new? Carburetor. Except if it's an older, like a Holly, a vintage, I don't care if it's a vintage Holly, they still make parts and you can still clean them up unless they're severely corroded and maybe the shaft's walking around and stuff. That's stuff the normal guy doesn't want to fool with. I mean, if you're a high-price shop, even them, they throw it away. I mean, if it's a one-of-a-kind carburetor, you might get into maybe having to find some parts, but you throw that away. The fuel tank is the other thing that you look at besides the brake lines and the fuel lines and the fuel pump. That's all bought brand new in my book. I'm not starting your car because when I go give an estimate, unlike my clipboard here, I have a clipboard here, but I go out, mainly the vehicles are, they're not running anymore. So the vehicle has to come to me. So I have a book and I go out and I make my suggestive list of what I told you. Your other tool that you use for restoration is this, okay? Because I told you I worked at professional shops that weren't that freaking professional, like Oh, well, go get the Morgan hammer. And then the Morgan hammer I did find, it didn't have the tools in it or whatever. You know, the shop looked like it blew up. And then the other thing, I'm going to tell you something about that glass in those vintage vehicles. You want to talk about expensive? Glass is expensive. And also check your window channels. Pull all your window molding. I don't care if it's pristine and it looks beautiful to you. Okay, there are ways, and I'm going to go over ways to treat those window channels. I'm going to show you that Chevy out there has a little bit of rotten where the window is, and I'm going to show you a technique that's going to last you a lifetime, how to stop that rust in that channel dead, and it does do it. So I have some knowledge of restoration, okay? Do I consider myself an absolute pro? At my age, I'm pretty good. Are there people better than me? I try to be humble. I don't try to be a bullshitter. That's why they call me Uncle Dutch. I don't try to be full of shit. So we've established to cut the belts off. Okay, we've established the things to buy new. Fuel pump, carburetor, fuel tank, brake lines, okay. There's other quintessentials in there, fuel filters, dielectric grease. Okay, as I told you, you're not going to nickel and dime a restoration. Get it running again. Folks, you might get it running again, okay? That's fine. But another thing to concede in your mind, especially if that motor does not roll over or it does not roll over right, okay? My second step after clearing out under there, looking at the condition of the carburetor, okay? Another new thing to buy, brand new, is a distributor, okay? Those distributors, the gears and stuff, the shafts, they can be worn, the bearing inside of it, you know, and the car starts up, you got new wires, you got new everything on it, and it's like my great grandmother when she didn't have her moonshine. They used to run out of moonshine on a pretty regular basis. My uncle and my great grandfather, they couldn't make the stuff fast enough, especially the grape flavored stuff. It was good for arthritis, is what she said. That's why I drink the moonshine. Well, guess what? I'm getting to be that age too, and you know what? When I do the stuff that I do, and after 8 tours of duty under my belt in my lifetime, I feel like I spent a night with the Roadrunner and Coyote getting shoved off all them cliffs. Okay, so where to go next? Alright, so you got your brake lines. What's the condition of the power booster? What's the condition of the master cylinder? Some of that stuff, if you're doing, like I said, if you're doing it for yourself, and you know you're going to keep hold of that car for 10, 20 years and really not part with it, that's the places to start, like the power booster. Replace all that. A lot of guys like me, when I get that engine compartment gutted and I get the motor out of there or broke down to the block, I'll treat the back of the firewall like I did in Holly Ann. I'll paint it and make sure it's got, you know, some rust proofing on it. I did put some rust coating along the bottoms and stuff like that. That's you know, that's another place where your vehicle, it's been exposed to moisture for how many years from the underneath like that, and it's easy once you start driving them again and getting them wet underneath, even if it's to and from the car show, that stuff can start deteriorating again at a pretty rapid rate. So rust coatings, POR, which it's not my favorite, but a couple of the products that I did use, they've taken the VOCs out of them, the hardening elements and stuff like that. So I'm really at a loss now. I'm actually experimenting with new products that are on the market, and guess what? They're not as cheap as what I could have went down to Sherwin-Williams and made one of my concoctions for. But since they've taken the VOCs, or the stuff is going all to water base, it's utter garbage. Okay? So we've established carbs, plug wires, even a new distributor, a new fuel pump, a new fuel tank. Pretty much, I told you, before you start even worrying about what color paint and buying Bondo and buying fiberglass and buying body panels, the first thing is to get that old wreck, if the body's not rotted, totally off of it, okay? Because there are cars like that. That's why, like I said, a couple of times people said to me, "What, were you drunk when you went out and bought that thing?" Yeah, I went out at night and maybe I had a few, and maybe, like I said, that pickup truck, the one I call Holly Ann, the Ford, I did get a lot of prestige. I mean, I got some pleasure. It's great therapy. But it should have actually went to the junkyard. Now, like I said, that I think about it in hindsight, okay? Next thing is the condition of your radiator. You want to start a motor up with no fluids in it and stuff, and never, ever, ever dump antifreeze in a vehicle. I see a lot of these guys. I watch, I don't want to call them out, this and that guy. You could probably see him. He's an old timer and probably pretty much got bad habits, or he'll throw a lot of bad parts on a new motor that's got a lot of blow by. That's the reason why I open up the valve covers. As I said, the next thing you do after you clear out under the hood, check the carburetor, this, that. There's this and that things under the hood. There's regulators and all that. Pull the valve covers. Soak them valves before you even think of yanking on that engine. Okay, I use transmission fluid. Yes, it'll make it smoke, and you might think the motor's busted when it starts up, and it might even make a few funny noises, but I do that too when I start up in the morning at my age now. I make some funny noises. And I have a few trucks like that. They make funny noises. I have this one out here. It has a valve. Once it's hot and it's running for a couple of days, the valve, which like I said, I attribute it to a valve spring, but when I start that up cold and just let it idle, I can tell I got a valve spring, a bad one. Okay? So then you start ordering stuff like radiator hoses, heater hoses, water pump, and stuff like that. But the first thing is to check the condition of that engine. Because then after the engine's running, okay, again, seal up the motor. Regasket, pull it. Regasket the whole thing if it checks out good. Maybe you're going to put it back together that it does, like I said. You can get it to run and it doesn't smoke. It's not a turkey. Okay, well, that's a motor that you regasket. And you get a new water pump. Get all the new stuff in there. A lot of times you pull the heads. Get new valves. Get the heads done. Like I said, here the shops have closed up. It's hard getting a machine shop. But, okay, new valves and stuff. Valves, you could check that compression on that old motor, and it might tell you the compression on a cylinder is bad when it's actually just the valves. Okay, so how the hell do you know? Visual, by having a guy like me. Now, when I'm there, the guys, when those heads are off, they're going to turn that engine over. Maybe even with the starter, we're going to hook it up, and those pistons are going to... I don't suggest that because you can get some wrist pin slap real easy without the compression. Okay, you can really actually do some damage, even to the bearing, spinning it over that fast. So I turn them over by hand, but I've seen other guys, they're in a hurry and they're going to turn it over with the starter. That's not the best thing to do, especially if the bearings are dry. So these are professional tips, okay, as I keep going through it. And there's things to buy before you even buy that first Bondo or you buy a new fender. My MO was, before the economy crashed into the toilet like this, I would buy, this, that, when I could afford it. Like, that's why the Chevy out there is not done, and it's here 5 years. First of all, it took a year or two for the guy to realize it was more than he wanted to afford redoing, because it needs all those things, spring hangers and stuff. Look at all those things, the condition of the frame, okay? A car with flat tires that's laying out in the field, okay, maybe you can't even get a jacket, you're going to have to get it up on a rollback. Well, after it's up on a rollback and it's yours, you don't know what the hell you bought. Maybe you paid $300 for it, $500, $5,000. Who the hell knows? Depends on what it is. But you might get a few surprises if it's been laying in wet mud. The frame could be totally rotted through at places. And I've actually seen people, they got the ass end of the car jacked up, maybe even the front, and they got stuff under it, and the rollback comes for it, and the damn thing, it folds in half. Well, it's happened. Now, we're going to go to glass. Your last stages is when you're going to go cutting rusty fenders off, maybe even what you bought is crashed. And I cut the stuff off with those grinder wheels, cutting wheels on the angle grinder. Makes it a whole lot simpler, because I've seen restoration shops, oh no, we don't do that here. Yeah, we yank and pull on shit till our knuckles are bloody. No, that's why I don't work there, okay? Your glass, especially like Holly Inn, that was one of the things the Ford had going for it, was its glass was intact. Get some of those fiberglass fireproof blankets. I think they're fiberglass filled, and they're like a Mylar or a Kevlar on the outside. They're not cheap. They're like $50 a pop. But when you go cutting, you can take clamps. I have those spring clamps. I have one in here. Yeah, here. Okay. Maybe even put it on the roll the window down a little bit and put that mat there to protect it. Or if you have roof gutters, put it to the roof gutter. If you have it over the windshield, duct tape it to the roof of the truck that it's not going to move when you're cutting shit apart. Because to ruin perfectly pristine glass, there are, like I said, there's other vehicles they pretty much been in a garage most of their life. Uncle Harry or Aunt Edna, they're both dead, and you inherited it, or somebody sold it to you. And that car is pretty much pristine. Well, you want to keep it that way. That's all part of some of those gems, you know. My buddy, I think I told you, he come across the '71 Pontiac Grand Prix. Boy, did he score big! But that was all a relative in the family offered it to him. The guy was he was older than me. He was in his 70s, and he was like, if I was a little bit younger, I'd have at this one. So he let the kid have it, and I admired that. I really did, that he didn't just take the car and park it for another 20 years till it's worthless. So now the kid's into it, and he's here coming here for tips. That was one of the reasons why I made this video, because there were several people that approached me on this channel. Not necessarily, I don't have a whole lot of subscribers yet, but I do have people actually that are calling me. So if you need a car, I don't really do cars. I do pickup trucks here in the Poconos. So if you're in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, I'm pretty much a good answer, man. I have a lot of good answers, and I have a lot of good, cheaper, economical answers. But okay, you're not, when those engines are rusted and seized up, a lot of it should just come apart. Okay, I'm not telling you dismantle every single thing, but valve covers should come off, valves should get soaked, cylinders should get soaked, and you know, like I said, you don't have to go out and well, even transmission fluid isn't cheap anymore. But I mean, you know, Marvel Mystery Oil, and you don't have to use anything brand name. Transmission fluid does the same thing. You can add a little bit of acetone to it, which some guys do, but that can actually invite corrosion, because transmission fluid does evaporate pretty rapidly when it's exposed to heat and the air. Putting acetone to it can actually invite rust. So I don't necessarily, it's only if you're trying to break something free that is really rusty. The acetone and other chemical things I sort of avoid. Okay, hopefully I've covered it. Okay, and then another thing, when you buy that car, transmission fluid, buy 2 times the amount of fluid you need, because you might have to do the job twice once you realize it leaks. Buy front and rear seals for the transmission. If you're going to pull the motor, it takes nothing. The transmission's right there. Put a new seal in it. Smell the fluid. A lot of times you can smell if the fluid smells burnt, pull the damn transmission. Just get another one. It ain't worth, unless you know a rebuilder. Now, like I said, we have a local guy here in the Poconos. If you know me and you're lucky enough, I can get a transmission rebuilt at a pretty decent price compared to what you can buy them for on the internet. So that's what I told you, is you don't want a leaky piece of crap that you got to pull all back apart once there's paint on it. Twice the motor oil, because once you get it running again, you don't know what the hell's still in that engine. So run it maybe 4,000 or 5,000 miles, maybe not even that, maybe 500 miles, and get that oil out of there, because there could be debris in it. There could even be sludge, depending on where the vehicle's been and what it's done all its life, especially a pickup truck off a farm. I've run into that myself. You got stuff in the oil pan that's unidentifiable. It's kind of like when you look at your cat's litter box, like, what the hell is that? So those are all the things. It starts not only with your brain, but it starts knowing where to look and where your problem spots are going to be. Because the tough part is brake lines, fighting those in, fuel lines, fuel tank. If your trunk floor is gone, it's going to be a breeze if the sending unit and the fuel pump's on top of the tank in a car. You know, you really got everything exposed that you need. Drop that goddamn tank out of there. Put a new sending unit and stuff in it, and before you button it up, or you know, the tank, button that up, get your new straps in, and then put your new floor in and everything, and everything's pretty much copacetic. That way you don't have to fool with anything. But your fuel tank, really, if they're corroded, like I said, if that car's 40 years old, I don't care if it's been in a garage. Take that fuel tank out and have a look inside of it. Very few of them from the 1960s all the way through the 70s and 80s. Those metal tanks, they're shot from the inside out, especially from the ethanol fuels. Get rid of it. Get something more modern, and if you're anal like me, a lot of times I will dump a bunch of 2-cycle inside that tank. Goes a long way. It smells a little funky when the car starts up. That's all part of running it off a bucket, or you know, you get a gas can or something and get it running that way. Because, like I said, noticing that funny odor or maybe smoking, some of the 2-cycles, they do smoke in a car, and cars with catalytic converters, that may not necessarily be good. That's why I register everything classic. I cut all that bullshit off of there. I don't want to deal with it at my age and stuff like that, that emission stuff. If I can get rid of it, I will. There's some of the newer stuff you can't get rid of it, so you got to watch what you do. But a lot of the newer stuff from the late 80s through all the way today, they got plastic tanks in them, which you don't. All you got to deal is with the garbage in the bottom of them, and if there's any scuffing, breaks, or cracks in the tank, get rid of it. So I'm going to conclude my video that conclusively, you younger people, don't be afraid to take the bull by the horns, but the bull can kick back if you don't know where to start with a restoration. You got to look at the restoration for exactly what it is, okay? And you got to be very observant, perceptive, and just put your brain to work as to how you're going to go about what comes first. Okay, it runs. Well, next thing after it runs, it has no brakes. It's kind of a no-brainer the way you're going to go through it, but thinking your way through how you're going to budget your money into the project, okay? What you're going to do next a lot of times is dependent upon the budget. You're not going to avoid having brakes, okay? So that's another thing to think about. That's one of the things I always buy. Calipers, brake hoses are another thing to think about. Brake pads, brake shoes, brake drums, brake hardware kits for drum brakes. That's all things that if I, like I said, if I was working now during the winter, and those are the nickel and dime things. It can be a lot when you got to buy it all at once during the summer. So over the winter months when I did work and stuff at the shops, those are the things that I would buy myself. All right. I'm sorry the way times are right now, but I'm sure somebody for Christmas, Santa Claus brought him a brand new rusty bag of bolts, and how to put that rusty bag of bolts together is what my channel's all about. And it seemed to be some of the younger guys that I'm attracting, because like I said, there were phone calls and questions put to me, and even like the kid with the Pontiac, that Grand Prix. That is a very nice car to start out with, but it kind of needs everything because of its age. All right, that I'm not going to waste your time anymore. It gives you something to think about. It gives you exactly where a professional starts. Okay, the interior and all that stuff that comes dead last. Okay, the interior I usually do that before the car is painted. Okay, thanks.